Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Cerberus at the Improv. I am one of your co-hosts, Payman Ascari. I am joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. Timothy Knight. How go things in your neck of the woods, sir?
Things are good. Slowly getting the new office sorted out and becoming familiar with living in a house and sharing space again. So it's progress. And 3 or 4 days ago, saw my granddaughter for the first time. So that was very motivating. Let's say I find myself suddenly very motivated.
Well, yeah. I'm very proud to hear that. I'm proud for you and happy for you. So
now we're excited.
Yeah. Best of luck and health and happiness to your new grandchild.
Thank you.
Mr. Meloche is my other co-host, Andre. How are things going over in Quebec?
Well, in my garden, it's going well. First of all, congratulations, Tim. It was a very nice picture with you and your granddaughter. So, and here, yes,
it is smiling, but I think that was just gas.
No, it is kind of calm here in Quebec now. Maybe it's the calm before the storm.
Well, why don't we start with you? We'll just jump right into our first topic, which is Alberta separation. And Preston Manning just gave an interview, and he kind of laid out everything that's wrong with Canada. But I thought maybe we could start with Quebec. How jaded, jilted are the Quebec separatists? They're no longer the cool separatists in Canada. That somebody's one up them.
Well, it's quite fascinating because the leader of the Parti Québécois, he's a proto-Marxist. He doesn't hide it. He's a World Economic Forum agent. The Agenda United 2030. And this week there was a big polemic about one of his candidates who was he's the next journalist of Radio-Canada, but also he was arrested in 2001 with it was not bomb, but it was it's like bomb to it's not like firework. It's like flares and he was arrested at the American Summit in 2001. And he was condemned, and he did 45 days of jail. And now he's running for the Parti Québécois. And there's a big polemic on X now, because they say where is the it's in the riding for the provincial by-election against the leader of the Conservative Party of Quebec. So now they're fighting it. The sad part of it is that you don't have any ideas. They debate about characters and personalities. So, and when you think about what is happening in Alberta, the separatist or the nationalist movement in Quebec, they are caught off guard because they cannot play the game anymore. The wild card of separatism, because Alberta is doing it. So they're a little bit stuck because they want to implement or they want to propose a sovereignty of Quebec, but they are also for the Agenda 2030. So they're in full contradiction with themselves, and people, they see it, but you don't have any alternative. You have the Coalition Avenir Québec, you have the Liberal Party of Quebec, you have the Parti Québécois, and you have Québec Solidaire, who is a real Marxist political party, and you have the Conservative Party of Quebec, which is not more intelligent than the Conservative Party of Canada. And even the Conservative Party of Canada wants to dissociate themselves with the Conservative Party of Quebec. You can say, welcome to the club, this is the soup, choose your alphabet, because I'm looking at that and I tell I will still be an orphan, political orphan for maybe another 5-10 years. So what will happen with Alberta maybe will change the context in Quebec. But for now, it is like, it's boring politics, very boring, no ideas, ad nominem attack. This is immaturity. I think we mentioned that. So I think there's a lot of people who are not mature in this country. It's not only politicians, a lot of Canadians. I was just watching a small clip from Jordan Peterson. I'm not a fan of Peterson, but he was saying the problem with Canadians, they all think that they are superior than other. And they all have a solution. They all have a simple solution for a complex problem. So wait a second, this is everybody is a great writer and will win the Nobel Prize. No, it doesn't work like that. And we see it on a small scale in Quebec. So maybe Daniel Smith, and I was watching a little bit Scott Moe. It was quite funny to see him because he's a very good tango dancer. He's moving around from left to right. But what concerns me more is that we see a government now, a federal government, without any accountability. That's more concerning, in my opinion.
Tim, you want to go? And then I have some thoughts to follow up on that.
While I do not think that the government of Canada and the other provinces will permit Alberta to secede with its territory intact, because I don't, that's not going to stop Albertans from making an extraordinary impact on near future history. I think they're going to gain significant traction, not just in Canada, but also in the States. So Carney's going to go back and forth between trying to appease Danielle Smith and the Albertans with, now he's saying, we're gonna promote resource development, oil and gas. He's talking about pipelines himself, right? So this is a process of appeasement, and we know how well that worked out for Chamberlain. But then at the same time, Danielle Smith is going to take these appeasements and bring them to Albertans. She's hedging bets. She's playing both sides, because you watch her speechify, and on one moment she's separatist, Alberta strong, etc. And the other part is Alberta, strong Canadians, right? So she's working both sides, and that's going to bite her in the ass later. If Alberta were able to, and they're not, but in a fantasy land, if they were able to, she won't be the first minister of that new territory.
It's funny, I've heard that from someone else on another interview. What I wanted to say is Preston Manning just gave an interview, and I'll put the link in the comments shortly. And everyone should go watch it. Like, the way this guy behaves as an expert, not just a politician or a statesman, but he's got intelligence, wisdom, class, and he laid out so many things. He expertly described what's wrong with Ottawa. So he said Canada's, the one strength that we have, we're the second largest landmass, and it's our resources, and we have a federal government that's preventing us from investing in our resources. So he attacked Ottawa. He sort of undermined Danielle Smith. He said, we need a fair, open, independent forum for people to voice their opinions, which is basically hinting at a constitutional convention, but he's implying that Danielle Smith can't accomplish that. And then he took a swing at the NDP. He went back to the CCF, and he called them, Andre, you used the word Marxist. He said their roots were full on Marxist, and they're talking about the nationalization of land. So I think it was a shot across the bow, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's interesting is that when they're using this type of vocabulary, we understand that the context is shifting. And what he's mentioning, it is what we see since many, many years, maybe one decade, maybe 2 decades. And François Legault, who's Prime Minister of Quebec now, is opening the door for a Trans-Canada pipeline. Mm-hmm. And he's saying that maybe it is not, we have to develop natural resources. It's quite funny because you hear the leader of the bloc who says that gas and oil are fossil fuel and it will never go through Quebec. Now the Prime Minister of Quebec is changing his narrative. And my feeling is that the climate change narrative is starting to collapse. It takes time. And don't forget that you have on international, in the international context, you have all those great power like China, Russia, India. I will just maybe not Iran, but Iran is the fourth biggest country with a stock of oil. So energy is progress. You know, in Quebec it was hydroelectricity, but we practically never develop our natural resource like gas and oil. And it is the time now to develop it. And if you would want to save Canada as a country, and if you want to appease Albertan, for example, you would start to talk seriously about equalization, changing the formula, first of all, and then developing a national policy on energy. That's what we discussed many months ago. I still believe in this. But do we have statesmen or stateswomen who are mature enough to discuss those policy on a national basis, then to have a counterbalance with the United States so that we could be good allies? I don't see it. So I think now maybe we are arriving in summer after the election, but I go again with it. There's no budget. This government is not serious. Those people are not serious. They are dangerous now. The government was prorogued. They have a minority government, even if they want to one more by-election, and nobody's questioning them. There's nobody who can go and say, we will stop you. We have no leverage. The next leverage in a situation like this, it is an insurrection. When people will be fed up of what is happening, they will stand up, and it will not be peaceful. This is a warning. It's not a threat. It's a warning. All history shows up that when you have a structure that is pushing boundaries like this, like you mentioned, nationalizing land, one day you will face people who are determined to protect their rights. When it will happen, I don't know. I hope that they will wake up, but I'm not optimistic about the political class, actual political class. They're not mature enough to understand, and it is a tendency. I wrote an article about populism. It is a tendency everywhere around the planet, except in Canada, because in Canada it seems that the system is completely blocked or locked by corporation and lobby. We mentioned that. We discussed about that many months ago. We will have to wake up. I don't know if Canadians can wake up.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to follow up on that, Tim, or I can jump in?
I do, and I'm thinking, where else in history, in a multi-party democratic structure, have we found all parties acting in collusion as one voice? Where else in history has it happened? What immediately preceded that event and what immediately came after that event? So at least then we would have some type of comparison against which to gauge what is likely to happen, and then perhaps how to counter it, right? But I keep thinking of what happened in the Russian Revolution, the first one. 1905, was it?
1905. That's a good
one, right? In the first one, where technically you're still under a monarchy, being the Tsar. So that structure, right? That's kind of sort of similar to the British structure in the free world. And so what happens when what happens when that government, which was somewhat democratic in the sense that there were different families and different voices that effectively are like aristocratic parties in a sense. I mean, it's a rough analogy, but it's there. What happens?
You're right.
What happens when they unilaterally tell the Tsar and his family, we're coming for you? And then undo the actual, and it was actually progressive. Right? And I mean the word progressive in even in the liberal sense of freeing up, making an attempt to free up the serfs, because the reality was, in freeing up the serfs, they would actually engender enough goodwill, right, by reducing their income tax by 1%, right, generate enough goodwill that they could then later take the land, right, in a more permanent way. the party or the families decided we don't even need a monarch. We'll do this without a monarch. And then having decided that they themselves were going to take control of the country because they knew what was the right way forward, you have what Canada has now is a uniparty that completely ignores the citizen and makes the decisions for themselves as a party. How long will that uniparty exist without a funding source, right? Because sooner or later, like you say, the people are going to say we've had enough. I think that trigger will be when Carney decides that he's going to use the CRA to send people a bill for their unrealized capital gains on their house, right? And I think at that time, your healthy, and I mean physically and mentally healthy, middle-aged homeowners and millennial homeowners are going to go down to town hall and say, "This is not happening.
We're not paying."
Right, we're not paying, and it's at this point you've got homeowners who are not boomers and not doing this, which is an extraordinarily small percentage of the population.
This is important what you're saying,
right?
yes.
So right now, if Carney's smart, he'll wait 5 years because most of them will be passed on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the ones that he will hit are the ones in the Gen X, mid Gen X, older Gen X. They'll be the quote unquote boomers of the next 5 years. By that time, they'll have been so inculcated into a system that has metastasized, like you say, been prorogued for almost a year, basically, that they're passing laws and taking money, additional money, without sitting down in Parliament to do it. And the opposition parties are not opposing. As a matter of fact, they're dead silent. I'm wondering how many of the conservative voters who were so passionate believing that conservatives would be a strong voice and that with much more seats they would be able to get things done, how many of them now are tasting sour grapes? Right. So the question is, how long until some type of tax revolt? Because I don't think Canadians have the stomach for full-on revolt.
It's interesting, the analogy you did with the 1905 revolution, the first revolution in Russia, because when yes, it's 1905, the first one. 1905, the Tsar at the time had to give away some power to the boyar, who were the aristocrat, but also the rising movement, populist or revolutionary movement. And then it took another 12 years before the February Revolution and the putsch of October 1917. Between those 12 years, you had like a vacuum where there's an empty space for power. And then you can arrive with something that is, somebody will fill the gap. But what do we see now in Canada is that we have a uniparty, or people, like you said, there's no opposition, there's no debate. There's not even debate. They don't even talk. I just saw a small interview with Pierre Poilievre, and he said, Carney, before the election, said, we need a plan for Canada. And now they don't have a budget. There's no plan. And we always talk about business plan, strategic plan, marketing plan. What will happen in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? There's not even a budget. So there's a vacuum somewhere, and somebody will fill this vacuum. Somebody will take the lead. Who? I don't know. Is it the people? Because like you said, Tim, think about the baby boomers who will maybe not be owners in 5 or 10 years. Let's say 10 years. You will have a generation of a younger generation who will be hit by this tax on property. It's not capital gain. You arrive and you have to pay $50,000 on the value of your house today. Tomorrow somebody arrives, me, I have a house. I will never pay. I will not pay. That's simple. Maybe they will seize my bank account like they did in 2022.
Yeah.
Let's look at what's happened in the last few years. Like the people, it looks like they're not paying attention, but they've bounced from like the Liberal Party to the NDP party. Some went with the Greens. In 2021, they tried going with the PPC. So like instinctively, the people realize that we need a solution out of this, but none of these solutions are working. What you're referring to is the uniparty, and I agree. And I always say the Conservative Party is a failed institution. It's supposed to be the opposition, but it's not. So the people feel that, and they're moving around. And Tim, to your point, like the people we have to find some way to organize them, or through one of these institutions. Otherwise, no matter how much they harm the people, if they're not united, I don't think they can fight back. Andre, if you don't pay your property tax, they'll just wait out until they can arrest you, and then
no, I do agree, but after that it is civil how you call this, not insurrection,
civil disobedience. Martin Luther
civil
King.
disobedience. You just say you say sorry, you can arrest me, but I'm not paying. Yes, but and it needs one person who does that, and after that it can unfold quite rapidly, especially if you go on social media. Today, there's always a tipping point. There's always a tipping point. Where it is, I don't know, but I can guarantee you don't need a lot of people, 5-10% of the population. How many people stood up to the government with the Emergency Act in 2022? How many truckers and sympathizers? 15% of the population?
Tens of thousands, and they all got slapped down, and nothing's happened since.
Yes, but tens of thousands over a population of 41 million. It's very little. But they were determined to face reality, and they paid the price for it. Some people were put in jail for 3 years without any trial. Their bank account were frozen. Their business was shut down. But they stood up, and they made the government back down. So I think, they have to be, the people who are in power today, they have to be aware of what they're doing. I'm not sure they are. I
think that the next version of the 2022 trucker convoy, and it won't be that. The next version of that type of public voice, like Winnipeg in I can't remember when that happened, the Winnipeg uprising, or Louis Riel, even further back than that.
Louis in Manitoba, yes.
So these things come to my mind as far as the impact on their current culture that the 2022 convoy had. The next version of that won't be a convoy, and the government knows that, because they're already closing off those doors that would otherwise make that happen. You be guaranteed that CSIS is better at monitoring and reporting voices that would organize, much better at it. And you be guaranteed that the UN has entities in Canada, if not the Chinese themselves, monitoring and keeping the government appraised of what they will now consider insubordinate and domestic terrorist activities. So when something does happen, it will be magnitudes more dramatic. And I don't think Canadians are willing for that to happen. And I'm quite certain that we are running out of Canadians who are willing to throw themselves on the barbed wire, because Canada has proven quite comprehensively that we are not willing to go over the bodies of those who go before us to take the land. We lack the courage of 1917. We lack the courage of 1943. Well, so I don't know what it will be. I don't think that a unrealized capital gains tax on homes will be enough to get people into the streets, although I said it because I believe that it's a possibility, but I don't think it's enough. I think all the government needs to do is wait until an aging homeowner passes away with the house paid off, and then adds to the death tax or collects it in death tax right at that time, in which case the inheritors get nothing, or in order to pay it off, you have to sell the house. So in so doing, I'm using the word BlackRock, but not necessarily that specific organization, but the idea where fully purchased and useful homes move back into the control of banks and lending agents like management companies and whatnot, and then they're simply turned around and rented out. So you're moving back to a serfdom structure, a fiefdom. Move back to a
What did I say earlier about the CCF and the nationalization of land? This
Yes.
is a quasi nationalization of the land.
Sure it is.
Well, what you're mentioning, I think, is important because during the 2008 crisis, financial crisis, the many people were having a mortgage with variable interest rate, and they could not pay back their mortgage. So they were only in the United States they were more than 8 million foreclosure. The banks were repossessing the house, and instead of paying the municipal tax on the value of the house, because people were losing that, they were destroying houses because the tax on the land were much cheaper. This is incredible, huh? 2008. What you're mentioning, and think about all those soft proposition, reverse mortgage. Reverse mortgage. You arrive at 65 years old. You have a $500,000 house. You hate your children. They hate you. It's a joke. It's not true, and you arrive at a point where you say it is paid. If I disappear, we have a storm here, so maybe. I hope I will not miss electricity. Anyway, the reverse mortgage is okay. The bank gives you $500,000, and after 10 years, when you die, or when 15, the bank owns the house, and your children don't have nothing. It was so nice. They presented that like something very nice. Many people fell for it. So it's always the same thing, like you mentioned, payment. Repossessing the house or nationalizing the land, the private property. It's the private property that is attacked, and after that, no private property, no free speech. They go together
because property owners they own something that the legislators want, so they have leverage and therefore a voice.
Yes,
you have nothing. I don't think the phrase that he meant, I think in the original Satanic, which he spoke it in, was you will own nothing and be grateful. Right? You will own nothing and be grateful, because he will pluck all the feathers off your chicken. Right? So I guess chicken was a bad reference. Where we're at is we have a population still suffering from the fatigue of the COVID nonsense and all that Stockholm syndrome, Pavlovian manipulation, right? Behavioral management, and Munchausen's by proxy, which is the mother of the sick child who makes the child sick and then makes the child healthy, etc. The goalpost movement game. The whole population is tired of that, but doesn't know what to do, because the Blues, who made extensive promises, have turned out to be electoral dysfunction, I suppose you could call it, right? They turned into nothing. They took their check and they sat down, right? So the question is, what can be done at an individual level when we know that it's too easy for the government to hobble the individual, be it through your bank account, or through woke policies in your business that prevent you from speaking up, speaking your mind, and other things that prevent you from engaging in public life. Imagine trying to get a business loan in this environment if you are Canadian born. Good luck, right? So, and then knowing that he's going to move toward universal basic income, probably start next year. And then, like we mentioned earlier, 2028-ish, some type of financial crisis that will push us into central bank digital currency. If the right, those who are on the right side of history, are going to do anything, you've got 3 years to do it. 3 years to do it. And the suggestion is pay attention to Martin Luther King and use those concepts.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're mentioning 3 years, because when I was thinking about the small interview that Pierre Poliver gave, he says, "Oh, Mike Carney does not have a plan." I think he does have a plan. He does
Absolutely.
not. He does not reveal his plan, and 3 years can be long. You can implement a lot of things in 3 years. A lot of things that will not be visible at first, like you mentioned, universal basic income. Yesterday, you were referring this when we were preparing. You said some
Yeah.
people will be attracted by this. It will be an improvement for them.
Yeah.
1% tax cut. It is an improvement. You always present this like it's a progress.
Yeah.
Is it really a progress, or is it like a meat grinder? You put your hands at the meat grinder and that's it. You cannot take it back. You're stuck. And tax is tax. I'm sorry. Ask the tax. It's a tax is a tax. It's not complicated. It's a way to. You have this now in Quebec. It is quite fascinating. Some restaurant, they say they're starting to have a mafia, who are saying you will have to pay for protection.
Physical
The
protection
government.
or customer?
Well, the idea of security is that we, as citizen, we renounce, we don't use violence, and we delegate this violence to the state for
Yeah.
protection.
Yeah.
But if the states use this violence against you, now we can see that the deal is unfair, and we see it more and more.
Let's go back to what you said about Martin Luther King. I want your opinion on this because I haven't studied him intimately. I was watching an interview and they said that Martin Luther King's whole philosophy, he looked at the laws and he said the laws that the government's passing themselves are illegal, they're unlawful, so they have to be challenged. I feel that we're not there yet in Canada. Like, you go to a Canadian, you say the laws are illegal, they'll be like, "What are you talking about? I like paying taxes." Like,
Yes.
Am I right about that? My interpretation of Martin
I
Luther
mean,
King.
I'm not opposed to contributing toward a national fund for hospitals and roads and et cetera, right? So that we can send diplomats overseas, so that we have good relations with our neighbors, so they don't, open up cop shops in my country, right? So I'm in favor of contributing to a fund like that. So if you want to call it a tax, then so be it. But I'm not interested in 65% of my income turning into a tax payment of some kind. I'm not interested in that. And
it's more complicated than
I think
that.
we have two essential problems. One is we have no way to push back against the laws that impose new taxes or abuse the taxes we are paying, and there is no way of doing it because we have no means of pressuring those we are paying to represent us. So we have those voices we hired through elections, right? Our members of parliament, members of legislative assemblies provincially, town hall, right? Your councillors and stuff. We pay these people to represent our needs at various levels of society. We have no means to keep their feet to the fire. They escape legal repercussions for every criminal act of omission or commission in their tenure. They escape it. And in fact, they bend the laws with modifications and amendments that make it so that they cannot be held accountable, and that if we go after them to be accountable, that we are shut down and prevented from speaking, reminding them of their oath. So what's that line? When tyranny becomes something, revolution becomes my duty.
Yes, it's Etienne de la Béotie, and it's important what you're mentioning, because in Quebec, I think it is 6 months ago, many people were starting to be very aggressive on social media toward civil servant, municipal, provincial, or you see somebody at the supermarket and you go and talk to him and you're very angry. The National Assembly passed a law against threat towards civil servant You can be fined $5,000 and 1 year in jail. Who decides what is a threat? This is incredible. And I saw this week in Mirabel, north of Quebec, in a municipal assembly, I saw the mayor of the city of Mirabel, a woman, extremely aggressive, threatening a citizen who asked a question and was challenging her. She cut the microphone, and there was a bodyguard, not a bodyguard, a security guard behind the man, and they are intimidating people who are asking questions. It's not even that they do not respect their oath, they're starting to be aggressive. That's the first point. The second point is you talk about hospital. Last week in Châteauguay, south of Quebec, there was about 200 people in the emergency room who had to wait 36 hours. They could not see a doctor, and they were sent home without seeing a doctor. The system is collapsing, and they do nothing about it.
Andre,
and one day it will explode.
The hospital thing, I'm not even going to go there, but we've talked about how the judicial system is collapsed into the legislative executive. So when we say, when Tim says there's nowhere to go to complain, you have no recourse. Well, you do have a recourse. Well, you had one, but it's gone now. They've hijacked.
It's gone.
And in so doing, they are able to execute bureaucratic activity where an accountant for a hospital only sees the dollar value of the bed, where a bed is a lot, right? LOT, right? A bed means this much money is spent for the staff, and this much money is spent for Medicaid. This much is for food. This much is for laundry. This much is for janitorial. So that entire budget amount is called a lot, like in manufacture, right? Lot number XXXXX. So, and hospital accountants use this lot or a bed. In COVID, perfect example of this is when they said we're running out of beds. You're a effing lying SOB. You literally closed beds, and by saying you closed a bed, we have 100 beds available. Well, we're going to save some money, so we're only making 90 beds available. And then they say they're overrun. This is what they did in COVID, right? We are overrun. No. You limited the number of available beds so that you could say you were overrun, and meanwhile you're making money because you're not delivering services.
Well,
and,
they were
hospitals or healthcare is not the only field in which they will perform similar activities.
You should see the scandal now in Quebec. We have 3 or 4 scandals about Lion Electric, the electric buses, Nordvolt, SAC-CLIC, which is the Society of Insurance, Car Insurance and License Plate. It is huge. It's billions of dollars. Hydro-Quebec paid $40 million in bonus this year, and they're losing money, and they laugh at the people. They laugh. They don't even answer, and they are starting to be aggressive. They are aggressive. You see citizens, they go, they ask legitimate questions, and those people are starting to be aggressive because they are challenged. And they are losing it. It's not citizens. I still think that citizens are very polite. Of course, you always have some lunatics, but most of them, they're very polite, and they use sarcasm, they use sense of humor, but they're pushing their luck. And the aristocracy or the bourgeois classes, they always play, when they play chess, they always play one. They always push the system a little bit too far, and then it tips.
To respond to Marilyn.
Before you do, I was laughing because Marilyn responded to something you said like 20 minutes ago, like mother of delayed reaction.
But it applies even now, because I want to respond to what Andre said in light of her statement, Canadians won't stand up anymore. And you said, Andre, the Canadians by and large are polite, and this is a culture. So I respond with, actually I rebut. 1 full third of Canadian adult employees is in some form of public service, right? And that's pretty much that's understood. So that means we've got 7 million, 8 million adult people working in some form of public service. So that's 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people that you know sitting behind a desk with a sign in front of them that says, if you are unkind to me, I will have you fined. 1 in 5 Canadians supports that view. The silent, quote unquote, silent majority has not gone silent because they're timid. They've gone silent because they can hide their crooked, thieving little union ass selves behind bureaucratic nonsense that is actually being supported by law to defend their position. And those bureaucrats, those public employees, are the reason why an idiot mayor in Victoria can say, pull down that statue, is when 10 public employees, public works guys, actually go out and do it, as opposed to saying, no, you're nuts. We're not doing this. Go find someone else. And then she gets mad, fires them all, which ends up in court forever, but so be it. And then she goes and tells a bunch of other people, no, we will not. And until that happens, this will not turn around. If those people in public service employment positions said, this is ridiculous, we are not participating, we're taking back the dignity that our position once held, and said no, and said it collectively and told their union managers to stuff it. This is where we need the same issues I had with white collar at the beginning of the COVID madness, when businesses were bowing instead of saying no. You don't have the intestinal fortitude to see beyond your next paycheck. You don't belong in this business. You don't belong in the business world, period, because you are supposed to be a pillar of your community, not a bending willow. And I've had enough of it. The Martin Luther King references are, we need to start sit-ins. We need to start civil disobedience, where we're simply, what happened in the 80s and 90s when everybody was chaining themselves up to logging equipment? Where did those days go? Like, can we not take examples from the civil rights events of the mid and late 60s? Are we too cowardly because we don't want some thug beating us?
Andre, you don't agree?
No, I do agree with Tim. What I want to say, he's asking, where are those civil disobedience or those movement of protestation?
Where are they?
Well, on TikTok. Don't forget that. Social
if
media.
They're on TikTok. They're 16.
But so you can have it on TikTok, you can have it on X, and there's a lot of people who will protest online. But in reality, are they really acting? I'm not a good example of that, because can I go and do to a protestation or manifestation? I should go because I have to defend rights. I'm a more conservative person. There's a lot of people who will say that they do it, but do we really support? Like you mentioned, Tim, Canadians are still polite, but yes, they're polite because they're paid by the government at a different level. And maybe I saw that 15 years ago. It was not a threat by my employer, but it was a strong suggestion. Outside of the company, shut your mouth. That was, implicit. It was not said explicitly, but I felt it. I said, you have some reserve, you're a diplomatic person, you say, I will not talk against my employer, for loyalty, but there's a limit. If you understand that there's something wrong, why we have the concept of whistleblower. I think for the last 25 years, we had the quarter century of whistleblower. What is the next 25 years? I don't know, but it will not be like just some people will start to react. And like you mentioned, I think it's not the older generation. They have nothing to gain to change the system. And many of them are benefiting from it.
We have a bureaucratic class is effectively wearing red armbands and ratting out their own family members.
Yeah, we saw it during COVID mandate too.
I think more than that, what we're trying to get at is a lot of this, it seems like it's social, but it's financially driven. Yesterday, the three of us were talking about how, Andre, before you used to get paid by your employer in cash. Now everything is through the bank. Money comes in, taxes are gone. It's just this slow whittling away of our purchasing power and our autonomy.
And it takes, we were talking about generation yesterday. It takes what, 2-3 generation, which is 20 years. It takes to 40 to 60 years to see the consequences of those long-term policies. And then we can refer to history. This is where it is interesting. But you need people who are, first of all, interested in it and educated. There's a lot of people who don't know history, even history of Canada.
Tim,
regarding the leading up to the mandates, 2020 halfway through, right? So they do the 2 weeks nonsense, right? And then give everybody a break, and then did a 3 months nonsense. But in this period, so it's all knee-jerk reaction. Okay, fine, knee-jerk, we have to do somewhere in there. Every layer of government should have done a risk analysis and a cost analysis to determine if this is worth what they're causing, what they're doing. It was never done. No government in Canada ever did a cost analysis for what happened. Like, so, and when you mention, get the words, you can't quite conceive of the future of what you're doing today. But we have 5, 6, 7, 800 years of democratic process and records, right? Language and conversations and bills and wars and trade agreements over the last 1,000 years, basically, of Western history that show us when a certain thing happens, you can reasonably accept A, B, C, D. Will there be modifications and differences? Cultural, financial, relational, trade? Of course there will. And so they knew what was possible. We've got 150 years of advanced behavioral psychology on the individual and on groups to back up. They knew, and they could do. The reason why they didn't do it is because they didn't want to do a document that would end up in the public realm. And they're going to do it again. What? No budget?
Let me. I'll kind of tee this up for you, Tim. I want to bring up another thing that the three of us talked about yesterday. This concept of 20-year cycles. So the first 20 years of your life, you're useless. The baby boomer generation, the born in 45. Well, yeah, as far as society,
Useless eaters.
Useless eaters. So 1945, the baby boomer generation is born. 1965, they're kind of unleashed, and for 20 years they destroy the world until the 1985 generation comes up, and like they've been inculcated in this bad culture, and then so they carry over all the bad ideas, none of the good ideas from their parents for whatever reason. So now you got 1985, 2005, and then it happens again. You want to speak to the 60s? You were saying what you saw during the 60s.
Well, I was born in 68, but so let's go back. I think
you didn't see it. Well, you were still.
I did. People say, "Well, you're kind of old." Well, I'm older than Sesame Street. I was there before man landed on the moon, right? So, but we won't get into that. The Andrew said
that's a rabbit hole,
right? That's me teasing another conversation. The war ends in 45. The boom begins in 48. Right? The baby boom begins in 48. So that means 65 to 68 is the real experience of sexual revolution, which is fueled by no-fault divorce, the pill, women going into the workforce, the agitation of surrounding all of the civil rights movement. So in 62 was JFK's assassination, which basically that ruined Camelot, and that's significant culturally. And then Vietnam is in there too, right? So all of this blender, right? You mentioned us going into the blender. Well, this is an entire generation of new. So these are the children of the boomers, 65 forward, brand new babies dumped into the effect of what the boomers now in their 20s and 30s are making happen, right? So then the formative years of a child up around 10, 12, right, years old or so, where psychology tells us by the time they're 2, by the time they're 5, these things are baked in. They're very unlikely to change their way. They're born into this. So even before we could understand it, we heard it on the radio, we saw it on the TV, it was in all of our conversations, the news, etc. The agitation, anxiety that sets up in a child, suddenly you're in the 70s. Well, 73 is the oil problem, right? The oil embargo, right? And so
The
it's
gold
almost like,
standard that was
right. It's almost like every 5 years there's a significant twist of the
yes,
system, right? And so what happens is by the time, so I'm born in 68, so I'm in high school in the early to mid 80s, where the me generation is just being born, right? 1983 is when MTV, right? And MTV is mind-bogglingly influential because MTV is effectively the internet for my generation. Because
yes,
I was familiar with computers, bulletin board systems, dial-up, right, and all of these things with your sister picking up the phone when you're half finished loading your game online. So all of this, and then MTV happens, cultural revolution, an astonishing cultural revolution. And because it was early and they didn't have a whole lot of video, we ended up seeing video from live concerts from our parents' generation. So that same anti-Vietnam, that same sexual revolution, that same drugs, sex, drugs, and rock and roll is pumped into my generation. That's why you have bands, partially why, such as the major bands that are very still famous today, 60 years later, is because we were able to use technology to regurgitate a phenomena, right? I saw Flare Jeans 2 years ago. Are you kidding me? I'm just waiting for Corduroy to come back. Please, God, no. No, God, please, no. Right? As these things come around, we talked about the compression yesterday. We talked about how time works, and so innovation increases invention, et cetera, and it feeds on itself. And so what happens is it inadvertently compresses the period of that culture, and it gets more in greater need of a relief valve, right? So you come up to the millennials, you come into that, and we have effectively taken our technology, which is early, so 95 and 96 is the very beginning of the internet in commercial sphere, right, among consumer sphere, and we took that and we immediately monetized it, my generation and those just a bit older than me. So when the millennials come into it, everything they're experiencing is already experiencing the marketing flux. So all that training, all that experience, those decades of consumer behavior is pumped straight into this, because the millennials and now the Gen Z and whatnot, this is their universe. This is the universe became so the world. When I was in my teens, it took us 3 days to cross a train to come from Truro, Nova Scotia out to Mission, BC. 3 days, 5 days, 5 days, right? But now we got teenagers that can instantly be on the other side of the continent, right there, right? Immediate. Look at us, right? I'm down here in the valley. You're up in Whistler, and Andrea's over in just north of down in Quebec. Immediately, instantly. So all of this agitation, all of this ability of everything here. What's that movie? Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And we are experiencing that, and the average person cannot process it so fast, especially when our primary tool for processing stress, money, right, is being taken from us, and not small anymore. They're now going after the homeowners that will basically, what was that percentage? 20%? The capital. So they're going to tax capital gains on a home. How much is that percentage? Does anybody know? Have they even released
well,
it?
I dug up a little bit, and for a house that would be the value of the house would be, for example, $500,000. You'll pay $50,000 cash now. Not you cannot, or you will have to take you increase your mortgage because you have to pay immediately $50,000, 10% of the value of the house.
Right. So then you've got somebody from my generation, mid-50s, who, let's say that they were, moderately not wasteful and got a home when they were in their late 20s, family, children, like the typical North American, right, white bread family, went through that. Now would be owning their home for about 10 years, which would be, I'm going to guess, 5 million homeowners in that scenario in Canada, maybe. So like 1 in 8 people have paid off their home. They own their home. I'm not referring to boomers. I'm referring to Gen X, because I think Gen X is the regular people, not the ones who are doing it, right? That this percentage of the population is the largest percentage of homeowners. They're the ones that stand the most to lose, because the boomers who are close to slipping the mortal coil in the next 5 years or so,
close to the rainbow,
right? Closer to the rainbow, and only to find out that it's anyway.
The rainbow or something else.
Only to find out it's more like a golden shower, right? That older generation is going to say, "Well, I've had my run." Maybe not all of them, right? But I understand that. I get it. You've paid your way. I understand, but you slip into my generation, and it's my generation that's making these stupid laws. It's the 50-somethings and the early 60-somethings that are in the seats of power. We made this happen, right? My generation made this happen. We made millennials.
I did not.
Right? You did not. I made 4 of them, right? But luckily, all 4 of my kids are sane, right? But that's because they saw me and said, "I'm not going to turn it like that."
As rare as a unicorn.
Don't open this door.
Right? As rare as a unicorn. What I'm getting at is, like I say, these compressions that we experience as our culture moves, and you identified it. It seems to be generational, but you're basically, the generational being 20 years is more like between the child being 10 and the child being 30. Because of crossover, right? There's always crossover, and I think those crossovers can be reasonably calculated, and I think there are people who do calculate it and people who plan accordingly. So when we see,
let me give a lighter perspective. I'm watching this show called Sliders. It's from 1995. It's an American show. They envision like a parallel future world. It's fantasy. And there was one where the Americans lost the Revolutionary War, so they're still under the thumb of the British. And the sheriff comes out. He's like this year we will have a 76% income tax, a generous 2% reduction, and that's where we're headed in Canada. With all of these taxes going up, they're squeezing us to the point where it's going to get to 70 and 80% taxation.
Yeah.
Why they would not do it? There's something that Tim forgot about the compression and the expansion of what happened between 1960 and I would say 1984 with the Reagan-Thatcher deal. You had the sexual revolution. You had the first oil crisis, the abandon of the gold standard, the Vietnam, Man on the Moon. Don't forget one thing. Through that sexual revolution, you had an abandon of moral law. People don't have moral law anymore. It's what we call the Far West. Me, myself, and I. There's a very good book from Peter Sloterdijk. It says After Us the Flood, and it's about Marie Antoinette, 17.
So
after Us. No, but this is a very great book, and he's referring to what was happening before the French Revolution, how the aristocrats were completely above the peasants. They did not care about what they were suffering, and they did not understand at the time the movement, the revolutionary movement that was building within the aristocracy. 1960 to 84, the destruction of moral law made people aware. And in this book, Sloterdijk is referring to what we call in America the self-made man.
Yeah.
The man that starts from scratch and he builds himself, and he's a self-made man. He builds himself, he become rich, and then he can go into politics and he can influence. And it's like Munchausen. It's exactly like Munchausen.
It's
And he
it's
refers to
Michael,
Munchausen.
it's Michael Douglas in the movie Wall Street. Greed
Well,
is good.
Yeah,
And he
greed is good.
defined my entire generation.
Yes. So why I say this is because without this moral law, you arrive in the far west. The might makes right. If I'm correct, I'm strong. I impose my law. Whatever you like it, whether you like it or not, I impose my law. Now it has infested. I'm using the word infestation. It infested the bureaucracy. They are civil servants protected by unions, and they say, I'm powerful because my power purchased. Always forget the expression. The how can
Purchasing power.
Yes, exactly. Is protected with indexation. And
Yeah.
it's this class that can always at least stay afloat with hyperinflation. Don't forget one thing: $1.3 trillion of debt only in Canada creates what it is more than $90 billion this year of interest on the debt. Why we don't have a budget? We don't even know. Anybody who is sane makes a budget, except some generation who did not understand. People were laughing at me all my life because I made budget with Excel. As soon as I was able to use Excel, I made budget. And I don't have the money, I don't spend. That's not complicated. Forget about credit or a loan or leverage. And the government doesn't make budget. If the government doesn't make budget, it's not only the idea of controlling, it's the symbol that you project. You say to people, to Canadian, doing a budget is not important. Your banks, they go and they say, wait a second, you want to start a business, you want to borrow $1 million. You have a business plan, you have a budget. Wow, Carney doesn't do a budget. Why I should do a budget? It is racist, maybe, if you ask me to do a budget. They are showing not only contempt, they are showing their ignorance, and they are showing how they are arrogant and how they don't care at all. We do not exist for them, but we have to pay tax, and they take the money from our bank account before we can even see the color of it.
So then, if there is no budget tabled or published, then when the House properly comes back to order in September, the opposition has nothing against which to prop a no confidence vote.
You think it will happen?
Well,
there's no more NDP. There's no more.
I get that.
It did not happen. It did not happen for 4 years.
Right? Because before the election, we were saying, right, that if the Liberals were to win, then we can expect the Conservative Party to push a no confidence by as early as October, and it would generally be on some type of money bill, because that's Robert's Rules of Order. That's the parliamentary. That's Westminster. I can topple a government on a budget bill or a monetary bill. But if I never table what I'm doing with the money, or where it's coming from, or where it's going, or who gets what, then, and you agree, the opposition agrees to those terms, that means they have effectively agreed to never post no confidence and to just line up at the trough until the next election.
Tim, there's like I hear what you're trying to say, but this goes back to what I've been saying, constitutional crisis.
Yeah.
It seems to me it is, but it seems to me that the Conservative supporters won't admit this, but I think they've given up on the Conservative Party, and the shift of attention on Alberta is my proof of that. The people are like, this party's useless. Let's see if we can get out of this mess, this quagmire, through Alberta. And just to continue on that, a couple of years ago, it was a big deal when you didn't have a budget. When Trudeau didn't have a budget, was it 5-6 years ago? People were freaking out. Now, Parliament's been prorogued. We don't even have a government. Forget the budget.
It's
We don't have a
normal.
government.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
It's fine.
in Soviet Union, the Communist Party was the government.
That's right.
The liberal is
That's right.
the government.
That's right. And that's where we're going, right? It's funny because Jordan Peterson has a jacket that's red on one side and blue on the other.
I saw that.
It's very clever social commentary because he's always talking about the importance of balance, right? So I get that. But I think we could literally issue jackets to everybody in the house and decide that on this day, it goes back to, remember the original Star Trek when you had the race war between the guys who were white on one side of the face and black on the other side?
Yes.
But they were white on the right and the other one was white on the left, and they were at war for centuries. But we just put on these jackets, and so that the red is on the right 1 week, and then the red is on the left the other week, and you just go sit on the appropriate side of the aisle. I mean, that's the farce where it has become. The solution is a constitution with teeth and a judicial system that will back it up, right? Because the judicial system is also there to, what's that word? Maintain le droit, right? Right. It's the judicial system is also there to keep the legislative body in check because of the nature of law, which is precedent based, right? The tree of life from the British system. You cannot make a new law except it comply with preceding documentation proceedings, but they're not doing that anymore. Example, when Hillier and Bernier filed a civil rights complaint. Well, it was a constitutional complaint regarding movement within Canada during COVID, and then they delay, the government delays, the judicial system delays until eventually Trudeau says we're suspending the mandates. He never said he's ending them. He said we were suspending.
Are you talking about Peckford or
Sorry,
Hillier?
Peckford and Bernier.
Yeah, Brian Peckford.
And Bernier, right? So, and then after he suspends the travel mandates, etc., then the court steps in and says, "Oh, well, it's all over now. It's all moot. It's behind you."
It was not over.
It was just absolutely not over.
They just avoided. They wanted to
a judicial system that is supposed to uphold the rule of law, bent to defend its paymaster who was abusing the rule of law. At that point, Canadian citizens have no recourse but to stand up and say no. And they did.
Payment. When we started the conversation, you referred to Preston Manning, and Brian Peckford is another example. Those, I think he's deceased now, Brian Peckford, or is he?
Still around. Unless he's died in the last few weeks.
No. I'm sorry. Maybe I mix it with.
He's staying out of the limelight, as far as I know.
I'm sorry, Mr. Peckford, if I I followed him during the COVID mandate, and the fact that you referred to Preston Manning, Brian Peckford was there when they implement the Charter of Right. And he was challenging the government, and Preston Manning, I think he's a famous political character. They are concerned about what is happening. So the constitutional crisis that you referred to started with the COVID mandate, and we're in the fourth or the fifth years of this constitutional crisis, which now is arriving at another level with Alberta. And do we see a solution? No, we're still in the middle of the crisis.
Can I tell a story? We'll go back to that. But somebody told me some tribe, when somebody dies, they put a watermelon or a melon and they whack it, and the louder noise it makes, the more likely the guy gets into heaven. So eventually somebody has an idea, like, why don't we put one of those like gun caps in there so that it makes a pop sound? Somebody puts a firecracker. And then one day, like, somebody put a bomb in there. This thing massively explodes. And people, like, they can't deny what's going on anymore. And you say constitutional crisis started with COVID. It's like that, but like it's getting to a point where people can't deny how absurd and how corrupt government is.
It is, and your analogy or your example is interesting because when we see what is happening now, if we are in the 40 years of a crisis, it will take time and it will not improve. Constitutionally, it will not improve. Maybe we will arrive at a point where we will start to discuss seriously about the constitutional monarchy and the republic, and we will say what are the advantage and the inconvenience of one system and the other, and start to compare them rationally. Try to find what could be a good evolution or progress,
Andre,
for Canada. Is it possible? I don't know, because
I'll quickly say, and then Tim, you guys can jump in. When I alluded earlier to people jumping, so there's a theory that the reason Stephen Harper got a majority government is because the youth hated him so much, and they didn't find the Liberals were doing enough. They went to the NDP and they split the vote. So when you're asking like when will people wake up, they're trying to. So the NDP, the Greens, the PPC, people are trying to understand. But once they get organized, we can say to them, listen, the Westminster system is flawed. Like, you're putting these ministers in these cabinet positions they're not qualified for, and then you have a permanent bureaucracy through the deputy ministers. But they need to organize.
When the Christian right says proudly that they are going to support the Conservative Party because they have to get rid of the Liberals, and then you say, yes, but Bill C4, and they go, yes, but we have to get rid of the Liberals. Yes, but stance on abortion, and they say, yes, but we have to get rid of the Liberals. And they say stance on MAID, and they say, yes, but we have to get rid of the Liberals. And these are Christians.
Well, there's
what the thing is,
with the new Pope.
You get the government you deserve.
Yes, Tim, it's interesting what you're mentioning about Christian. Let's talk about religion for 5 minutes in Canada. You have two major religions, which is Christianity,
Sunni and Shia.
No, forget about this.
Let's talk about.
I'm not talking about influencer. Okay, that's a very big difference. You have the Protestant.
He's already admitted that Christians are no longer influencers in Canada.
No, no. I'm talking about the difference between Protestantism and Catholicism. And
right.
I will refer to this because Tim, you're Irish, and I'm Catholic in Quebec. French Canadian was and I had a conversation with a colleague last week, and we were talking about, and he's from Ontario, and he's Protestant, and he was telling me, I will never tolerate Catholicism. I hate it. And I want to say, what do you dislike in that? Because you have on the top of it, you have Christianity. Then you can see the influence of Luther with the beginning of capitalism in 16th century in Great Britain, and the different path in France, in Germany with Catholicism. What do we see now? It is a crisis that will break the country as we see it. Like you break an egg. We will break it. Can we break it so we will evolve towards something that will unite Canadians? Because you can talk about religion, but you can talk also about language, culture. And is it possible? With 41 million, you need statesmen and stateswomen who know history, who have a certain level of diplomacy and culture. Constitutionally, they can write the document and they can debate and disagree in a civil matter. Do we have this today? With the team up and elbows up, they all acted like teenagers. Can we expect those people to be mature, men and women? My answer is no, we cannot. Except you look at Preston Manning or Pickford, they were statement. Do we have this today? I don't see them.
And keep in mind that Manning and Pickford, right, are actually from the old guard. Right. So in that sense, right, so that noblesse oblige of the old guard still exists, but they're now 80 years old.
Well,
right?
Trump is 79.
Right.
Trump,
So
I'm sorry, Trump is 79, and he's still
right. That generation that still had some semblance of noblesse oblige is moving quickly behind us. What baffles me about the Christian right, or let's say conservative right, Judeo-Christian worldview, is that people with a Christian worldview ignored their fundamental convictions of their faith out of fear.
Yes.
And that's a fact. So they allowed the fear mongering, the fear porn, to turn them away from their own foundational tenets of their faith, which those three elements, C4, abortion, MAID, and others like that, are fundamentally on the quality of the individual life. Right? Because MAID now also extends is euthanasia, but extended not from the old, but down toward the young as well now. Right? So they turned their back on a fundamental tenet of their faith, which is the sanctity of human life at all stages. And they turned their back on it out of fear.
You know, it is funny what you're mentioning, because I think about now the new Pope. The new Pope, his name is Leo 14.
Yeah.
Leo in Russian means lion.
Lion.
Don't forget one thing. He's a lion. And he said, I will quote him. He said, the marriage is between a man and a woman. So you're right, Tim. Many people, we can forget about Christianity if we want, but moral values about euthanasia, abortion, the sacred of life, human life, they turn their back on fundamental value to get the liberal out. That does not work. And I think the Conservative Party made a very big strategic mistake by not addressing.
Oh yeah, they're done. Give me a few minutes. I want to tie a couple things together. So Tim, you use the word conservatism. I don't want to make this academic, but like the concept of conservatism, where slow and steady, don't rock the boat, as opposed to liberalism.
If you don't want to make this academic, you should start a different channel, because that's all we do here.
and then you have liberalism, progressivism, which is just all bets are off, balls to the walls, just change with the speed of sound.
Progress at the expense of everything else.
Exactly. And I talked about like the 20-year generation thing, and I'm talking about the West. Growing up as a kid, when I was in Iran, your parents were God. So we were conservative, and whatever your parents told you, you believed, and that was the value system they gave you, and nothing changed as much. You didn't really have these 20-year generations. You even had sometimes arranged marriages. So you don't have this thing where you go to the big cities, you start getting into drugs and carefree sex. So I think what I'm trying to say is liberalism, the progressivism, it doesn't work. Things just go off the rails. Like you need some semblance of handing over the good parts of culture, which is what parents are supposed to do.
Well, first of all,
in light of that, I propose that the sexual revolution started in 1939.
Oh, it started even earlier than that, because you had the Weimar Republic in Germany in 1919.
You put women in the workforce.
Well, 1933, when Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany, the Weimar Republic was a decadent and perverse society in Berlin. And
still is today.
Well, you would be surprised what happened after the fall of the Berlin Wall. My wife, she's from Soviet Union. She said, I was seeing German porn in 1993. She said, we were shocked. Look at what is happening in Toronto. You see people with bondage, with dog mask, and on a leash, and with children around. What is that? You call this progressive? You call this liberalism? This has nothing to do. The word liberal means freedom. It has nothing to do. The outcome of that is that we are bound by our impulse, and we have to master them. We have to control them. If we do not do that, it will be the government or an external entity who will control us. And what we see today, it is this path that we are on now. It doesn't mean that we have to ban everything, but where are the moral law? There's no moral law anymore. It's the law of the jungle.
And I just want to clarify, I'm not knocking women in the workforce. I'm saying that there was the situation was so dire that they had no option but to enter the workforce to save their livelihood, to save their country. And it is different when you're forced into it than when you choose to go into something of your own will. So I'm not knocking women in the workforce. What I'm knocking is the culture that was intentionally created to force a cultural shift that ended in a sexual revolution. So women were manipulated by their sense of duty and honor as mothers and sisters and daughters to participate in a cultural shift, and eventually you emulate your master, and that's what I think part of that.
That's
5 more minutes.
That's important what you're mentioning, but don't forget 1939 with women going to work because men were at war. This is not new, because in 1925 that was happening in Soviet Union, promoting abortion. Women were and men. It was very funny because in 1925. Men could divorce. They could divorce and get married, and women were losing their rights because they were considered like tavarishi, comrade, and they were equal. Of course, we understand what happened. That was already in plan in 1925 in Soviet Union. What the model was brought back, and then we brought the civil movement, or the right for women to vote. Okay. Are you politically educated to vote? First of all, this is one thing. Then the labor force, women, they go to work, but look at what is happening today. You have the husband and wife, they both work, they cannot have a house. The purpose of pushing women to work outside was to lower the wages. The more you have people on the market, working force, the lower you will be able to push the wages down. That's what we see since 100 years. This is basic capitalism. And you mentioned liberalism compared to conservatism. Conservatism, it is to preserve life. It doesn't mean no progress. It doesn't mean, it means that we preserve mankind, you preserve life, you try to, and
Andre, sorry, not to interrupt you, but I wanted to pick up on something you said. When I said I didn't want to make it academic, you go through life. So you live on this planet for 60 to 80 years. It takes you 60 to 80 years to realize what's right or wrong. If every generation we're learning that, doing that again, we're fucked. We're screwed.
Well,
like you need your parents to tell you those things.
Yes, and you're right. And don't forget one thing. When you think about heritage, a man my age start to think about the heritage, passing it to the younger generation. Why? Because the experience of life is what, 75, 80, 85. And then you say, okay, I will decline. So you say, okay, my time is to use my wisdom to help younger generation develop their skill, their knowledge, and their own wisdom that they will pass to another generation. If you deprive any generation from that, or their small heritage that they leave to their children, It's like every generation has to start from scratch.
Yes.
Financially, and you can never catch up on inflation. You can never grow. You can never grow. Look at old families. They have mansions, castle from generation to generation. They just leave it. Okay, you have other problems, but they grow. They build dynasty. The elite doesn't want ordinary people to build what we will call a dynasty. An individual who gets married, has children, he wants, when he will arrive at the end of his life, he wants to be remembered, and he wants to pass something to the next generation. This is evolution. It has nothing to do with what we see today, neoliberalism. It is pure jungle.
If I'm going to be a serf, it appears where we're going. If I'm going to be a serf, I think I'd rather be a serf to an aristocratic family than a Marxist juggernaut.
That's a very good point.
Right? So, and doesn't the scripture say that? Choose this day who you will serve, because you don't get to choose one, or you don't get to choose both. You only get one. So choose wisely.
Wow.
And so if we're not going to push back violently in creative ways, not just physical, but in creative and effective ways to motivate the people to say, no, we're done, then we need to cool down and say, who will we serve?
Well, that's important. Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, he was the first aristocrat to free his serf, and he was criticized because all the other aristocrats were saying, what are you doing? And he was saying, wait a second, but there's no freedom without private property. Some serf of Leo Tolstoy were saying, you're a good master. You protect us. Even when we're getting old, you take care of us. You take care of our parents. We don't want to be free. We are ready to serve you because they're practically part of the family. There's a very beautiful series, Downton Abbey. I don't know if you saw it many years ago. Yeah. And the family takes all their servant as a family. Okay, it's romantic and it's very funny. It's very nice series, but you see that they care. That was the old English aristocracy was taking care of people. And I agree with you. If you have to be servant of somebody, choose wisely.
Yeah. So, and I've found that serving myself, pretty shit outcome.
Irish. But you mentioned something yesterday when I said Canadian did not suffer enough. You said, when Canadian will suffer as much as Irish will suffer, they will all be Irish. I will never forget what you said.
Yeah. So, Payman, the both of us have managed to cut you off when you said you just wanted 5 minutes apiece. So,
oh no, I just said like 5 minutes to go, and then I got to drive down to West Van.
Oh yeah.
We had a whole bunch of stuff that we were supposed to talk about. We didn't really get to, but that's Cerberus for you. I don't know how to end the show, so
I think I do, because I think this actually segues into probably what we should use as some type of quasi-focus. I mean, we still want to talk about other news items of the week and whatnot, but I think a general feel, like a theme, will be to go more in depth into Payman's newfound appreciation or expressed appreciation for constitutional reform. And that we can go more into that. Remember way back when we were starting about this, I was saying I'd like us to go into the history of the Constitution, the history of Canada, and to show the evolution of the development of the nation and to the Constitution today. And if in some weaving over the next few episodes we can go into that, I think that would be give people something to look forward to, rather than today's episode, which was exclusively doom and gloom.
I can just maybe add something, and maybe toward this approach of a constitution, we could ask our viewer to give us suggestions about what they think would be a good constitution. What would be the characteristic? That would be helpful. We can after that debate and discuss about it.
the people contribute to their own constitution. What a
Yeah,
novel
well, of
idea.
course. There's a lot of Canadians who are very, very intelligent and
Oh, yeah.
wise, and they have great ideas.
Yeah.
I think we should welcome those ideas.
I think it's a great idea, Andre. Well, I wanted to end it on a funny note. They were going to name this boat, and they figured, why don't we open it up to the public? And the number one suggested name was Bodie McBoatface.
Right. So,
Constitution, Constitution face.
we tell
Yes.
everybody to send us a one-paragraph constitution, and yeah, we'll just have some fun with it. Who knows?
My guess is that the number one suggestion will be some version of anti-Semitism. I'll give you the first one.
Yeah.
Keep
Thank
this
you.
for the next episode.
All right, all right. I'd like to thank my two co-hosts, and a big thank you to the audience. Everyone have a great weekend.
Goodbye.
Thanks again. We'll see you in a week, maybe.